cover it up.
Okay.
We have sufficient time till the next session. That will be the valedictory session.
Okay.
So we have sufficient time. I think if we have been able to cut our lunch by 10 minutes, so I think we are more or less on time.
Okay.
Yes.
Then I will wait for
Yeah.
delay to
Yes. Dr. Faisal Ahmed, Praveen sir, Dr. Faisal को भी pin कर दो please.
I am here already.
Yes sir. Praveen sir, उन्हें pin कर दो please. Yeah. Thank you so much for invite for accepting my invitation, Dr. Badni Narayan. And I know it's very difficult for you. I think it's 2 a.m. in US right now, Seattle. More or less
12:15 a.m. So not.
Yeah, Dr. Jutati from Thailand, Professor Faisal Ahmed, and Dr. Anjali, both are from Delhi. I know it's very hard time, but really thank you so much for sparing time for this event where all of us can learn from each other. So I think Ms. Kamna Ved, it's exactly 12:45, so it's good to go.
All right, so good afternoon, one and all present. I, Kamna Ved, Assistant Professor at Maharaja Agrasen Institute of Management Studies, welcome all of you to the panel discussion of our 6th International Conference on Drivers of Global Economy Recovery with international academic partners, Thammasat University, Thailand, and Walijat College of Applied Sciences, Oman, and our publication partner, Thailand and the World Economy. We all are going through difficult phase due to COVID-19 pandemic, and it is the need of the hour that we should work on global economy recovery, as the devastating effects of COVID-19 have slowed and reversed the economic growth and sustainable development. So our conference theme is to discuss about the overall shape and the nature of economic recovery, the underlying factors that could play the most significant influencing role from different countries, and the scenarios that could result. All the nations must use the scarce resources to combat the pandemic and construct societies that could better handle the crisis in the future. We must rethink, plan, and work collectively at the national, regional, and global level with a coordinated response in order to recover the world's economy. So based on the theme of our conference, the drivers of global economy recovery, we are going to have a background paper presentation authored and prepared by Dr. Sanjay Mangla, Head, Department of Economics at Maharaja Agrasen Institute of Management Studies, Ms. Sakshi Goyal, Assistant Professor at Maharaja Agrasen Institute of Management Studies, and Dr. Jutati Jongwanik, Associate Professor, Thammasat University and Editor, Thailand and the World Economy. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Sakshi Goyal, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, for presenting the background paper. Ms. Sakshi Goyal has more than 8 years of teaching experience in economics and management subjects and is currently appointed as Assistant Professor with Maharaja Agrasen Institute of Management Studies affiliated to GTS-IPU. Ms. Goyal has done economic honors from University of Delhi and Masters in Economics from Hyderabad Central University. She has qualified UGC NET and is pursuing PhD in Economics from Delhi Technological University, Delhi. Her area of research is entrepreneurship education. She has also worked with Ministry of Commerce and FICCI as a research fellow. She has successfully organized and attended several international conferences and FTPs under various themes and subject areas. Ms. Goyal has keen interest in undertaking research and has published several research articles and papers in UGC CARE and peer-reviewed journals. Now I invite Ms. Sakshi to present the background paper.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for inviting me. It is a great pleasure to present the theme paper of the conference on the topic Drivers of Global Economic Recovery at this platform. The agenda of the paper is to provide better insights of the world economy after any crisis, especially COVID-19 pandemic. Also, it will discuss about the challenges of global economic recovery, which are faced by almost every economy in the world. After that, we will discuss about the drivers of global economic recovery and various theoretical and practical aspects related to advancement of these theories. Then we will discuss about the role of international organizations. And lastly, we will conclude by the policies and the efforts which are being undertaken by various countries. As we all are aware that coronavirus pandemic has given unimaginable economic shocks to global economy. So the repercussions of shutdowns all over the world push the economic activity to critical lows. The depression caused by the pandemic has not only plunged many into poverty, but it also harshly affected the income levels of millions. According to a World Bank report, global economy will expand at the rate of 4% in 2021 under the assumption of widespread rollout of COVID-19 vaccination during the year. Still, recovery in the economic situations will not be at par without decisive moves of the policymakers to curb the effects of pandemic. Along with prioritizing rapid deployment of vaccine, authorities also aim at sustainable growth through facilitation of reinvestment cycle with low government debt dependency. According to World Bank Group President Mr. David Malpass, to overcome the impacts of pandemic and counter the investment headwind, there needs to be a major push to improve business environments, increase labor and product market flexibility, and strengthen transparency and governance in the economy. As you can see in the slide, the analysis of the table shows that the following table basically shows the percentage of GDP growth of some major economies during the year 2020. The analysis shows that majority of the world's economies shows a contraction or negative growth during the year 2020 as a major impact of global lockdown. Most of the countries having positive growth shows a growth between 0 to 2%, whereas countries having negative growth ranges between -4 to -10%, and Libya showing a negative growth of 66%. According to the study, there are few challenges which are being faced by global world economies during the recovery and revival of economic growth. So few of these challenges include lack of finance, lack of sufficient availability of COVID-19 medicines and vaccines, increasing unemployment and salary cuts, weakening of investment opportunities and avenues, restrictions on cross-country travel, lack of sufficient workforce due to their migration to their hometown, increasing number of COVID-19 cases with next level of pandemic waves and uncertainty about future lockdowns. And lastly, but not the least, increasing internal unrest among different people in different countries. Now, what is the role of COVID-19 vaccines in economic recovery? I think it is one of the most important points that should be taken into consideration. The challenges and uncertainty about the recovery during prevailing pandemic situation is exceptionally large, as it is difficult to assess how prolonged the health crisis will remain in the world. Therefore, it becomes quite important to increase the accessibility of COVID-19 vaccines both across developed as well as developing economies. Another challenge that remains is the number of COVID-19 cases, especially in developing countries like India, which are reporting. Although the number of reported infections is much lower than before, but the country has been reporting over lakhs of new cases every day with over 400 to 500 deaths per day. Therefore, how fast a vaccine will be available will be another key factor in facilitating economic recovery. However, low-income countries would not be having significant availability of vaccines until 2022, which will be a bigger problem as the pandemic would not be over until vaccines are available for each and everyone. At the same time, there have been threats of risk of spreading the resistant mutations resulting into reduction in the efficacy of current vaccines. which will ultimately undermine the recovery of the global economy. Now, there are few exogenous factors which are also taken into consideration while doing this study. There are few uncertainties which are attached with effectiveness of policy actions. Apart from that, there are few countries are having higher fiscal debts, but they are having limited fiscal space as well. One of the exceptional cases of China, which is having some room for maneuver, but many other low-income countries are not having the same magnitude. Different countries are following their own fiscal and monetary policy strategies to combat the global recession. The role of international organizations. According to the Director General of WTO, the biggest economic stimulus for developing countries would be equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. The World Bank Group's Global Economic Prospect report notes that although the global economy is expected to recover from COVID-19 induced recession, the progress will not be at up to the par. Global growth is projected at 4% in 2021, but still there are chances of another spike in cases which could reduce it to 1.6%. So in this regard, immediate policy priorities including supporting vulnerable groups, ensuring a prompt and widespread vaccination process to bring the pandemic under control and to address the risk associated with debt accumulation is quite important. The study reveals a comparison of policy efforts by international organizations for economic recovery. And as we can see, according to the survey conducted, it has been found that IMF played a major role in supporting the policies and efforts for global economic revival. It was followed by WTO and UN, and also the respondents are of the view that WHO, World Bank, and Asian Development Bank played almost equal role in global growth and recovery during the pandemic. Now, the stimulus measures which are being undertaken by various economies include the government of various countries announces various fiscal stimulus measures. These refer to various benefits and incentives in the form of financial incentives and tax cuts. Apart from that, the main motive behind providing this kind of stimulus measure is to increase the aggregate demand in the economy, which will be helpful in raising the employment opportunities and production capabilities of the industries. This would also increase the income of the people in the economy and which will have a positive impact on the aggregate demand. The given table shows that Japan have higher stimulus package at 54.53% of its GDP, which is being followed by Germany with 35.87%, Italy at 28.49%, and US also announced 26.46% of its GDP as stimulus against COVID-19 pandemic. On 11th March 2021, the House of Senate under the presidency of Joe Biden in US announces a direct benefit of $1,400 to every eligible individual as direct aid under the Unemployment Benefits Program. Similarly, in India, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister, Honorable Finance Minister of India, also announced a fiscal stimulus equivalent to 3.2% of India's GDP. The main focus of all these stimulus packages includes the health-related measures, supporting the business activities, and to support the household consumption and their daily activities. So following are the main findings of the study. According to the survey conducted by in the study, WTO and IMF performed quite well in the policies and efforts to counter the crisis and revival of global economy. Also, the respondents of the study are of the view that policies adopted by the government of India to counter the crisis and for the revival of global economy are quite good. Similarly, Thailand government also have performed quite well in taking the steps to revive the economic growth. The highest scores are obtained by UK and Germany in terms of policies adopted to curb the crisis impact on recovery of the economy. These are the outcomes of the study as taken from the response sheet. So here the conclusion is that the study shows various measures opted by some countries which acts as driver to the economic recovery. The government of almost all the nations tries to insert huge liquidity in the form of fiscal stimulus packages and other schemes in order to boost up the demand in the economy. The results is visible in the form of V-shaped recovery round the globe, which is visible from the major stock market, which acts as the barometer of the economy. So the major drivers of the global economic recovery includes rise in consumer spending, including pent-up demand, investment in business, rise in investment levels, recovery in business, and rise in net exports volume at global level, which accounts for large-scale increase in the growth rate due to feasible movements in the components of GDP. Thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you, ma'am, for presenting us the insights based on your paper about the various measures adopted by the different governments and about the availability of the vaccines, how it is going to result. With this background paper, considering the theme of the conference on the need of global economy recovery and looking at the importance of this issue, we have arranged a panel discussion to have a view from different sections of the economy, including experts, economists, researchers, and academicians amongst us. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Anjali Tandon, Associate Professor, Institute for Studies in Industrial Development, Delhi. Ma'am is going to be the moderator for this panel discussion. Dr. Anjali Tandon's doctoral thesis is on structural changes and energy used in the Indian economy using input-output models with special reference to India's international trade. As a part of her MPhil dissertation, she has specialized on India-China merchandise trade. She holds a master's degree in applied operations results and bachelor's in mathematics. Prior to joining ISID, she has worked with National Council of Applied Economic Research and the Indian Institute of Mass Communication. She has been the recipient of ICCSR Doctoral Fellowship. She was a visiting researcher at the University of Melbourne. She is contributor to the Global Trade Analysis Package version H database of Purdue University, USA. Dr. Anjali has work experience of over 20 years in different areas. Her research interests include trade, FDI, industry, domestic agriculture policy, and energy. She has authored academic papers in reputed refereed national and international journals and also presented papers in various seminars and conferences. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. We have amongst us 4 distinguished panel members from different parts of the world with us for this panel discussion. First, we have with us Professor Faisal Ahmed, Associate Professor and Area Chair, International Business, Ford School of Management. Professor Ahmed has 15 years of experience as an academic, researcher, and consultant. He held the position of consultant to United Nations and other organizations. He is frequently invited as a speaker, panelist, and resource person by the institutions and think tanks in India and abroad. He has published several research papers, book chapters, and monographs. He is the author of the textbook Business Environment, Indian and Global Perspective, published by Prentice Hall. His articles have appeared in the newspapers like the Hindu, Business Line, South India Morning Post, the Economic Times, and the Straits Times, among others. He has been interviewed as an expert by national and international media, including Vietnam TV and the BBC. We welcome you, sir. Next, we have with us Dr. Badri Narayanan Gopalakrishnan, co-founder, Infinite Sum Modeling Inc., United States. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us so late at your end. Dr. Gopalakrishnan is an applied economist with 18+ years experience and expertise in economic modeling, data science, in many areas such as international trade, energy, agriculture, industry and health, economic impact of new technologies like drones, robotics, 3D painting, nanotechnologies, cloud, IoT, blockchain, etc. Formerly, he led the development of a complex economic database of over 140 countries in the world. He has visited 29 countries for work, collaborated and worked with the clients, team members in many more countries. He was consultant with McKinsey, UN, World Bank, ADP, IFT, etc., and a senior fellow with ECIPE. He has many papers published in national and international journals of repute. Sir is also reviewer in many journals like Applied Economics, Economic Modeling, Journal of Quantitative Economics, and many more. Sir, we welcome you. We are delighted to have you with us. Now, I am pleased to introduce another panelist amongst us, Dr. Juthatip Jongwanik, Associate Professor, Thammasat University, and Editor, The Thailand and the World Economy. Dr. Juthatip is an Associate Professor in the Faculty of Economics, Thammasat University, Bangkok, Thailand, and Editor, The Thailand and the World Economy Journal. Ma'am holds a PhD, highly distinction in economics from the Australian National University. She won the Best Paper Award in the International Economics and International Macroeconomics from National Research Council of Thailand in 2009 and 2019, and from Thammasat University in 2018. Her research interest is international economics, capital mobility, multinational enterprises, international macroeconomics, and international production network. She works as an international consultant for various international organizations, including World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Economic Research Institute of Asian and East Asia. She has published 3 books, 2 in English with Nova Science and ICS, and 1 in Thai. 52 papers in leading peer-reviewed journals such as World Development, Food Policy, World Economy, Oxford Development Studies, Review of Policy Research, and list goes on. And 15 book chapters from the past decade. Most welcome, ma'am. We are happy to have you with us in our international conference. Next, we have with us Dr. Anjali, Associate Professor and Head Department of Economics at Maharaja Agrasen Institute of Management Studies. Dr. Mangla carries 12 years of experience in both academia and policy research. He holds a PhD degree in economics from Jamia Millia Islamia, Delhi. He has undertaken several funded projects on economics, e-commerce, and public policy. He has to his credit 15 research papers in journals of repute, 2 edited books, 3 book chapters, 15 papers in conferences, 9 knowledge and discussion papers, and opinion articles. He has also conducted several conferences and FDPs. He has also conducted several funded projects on various facets of public policy and digital economy. His areas of interest are regional inequalities, industrial productivity, trade, and investment, and e-commerce. I welcome all the distinguished panelists with us. Now, I would like to request our moderator for the panel discussion, Dr. Anjali Tandon, to take over the panel discussion. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Kamna. I'll start from here. If the organizers would confirm me what is the time limit that I have. It's 1:10 now. So how much time do I have at my disposal?
If all of us agree, so can we go till 2:05? All of us.
So
Professor Faisal, Dr. Bandi Narayan.
yeah,
That's fine. Yeah.
I will
okay.
Stay. Yeah.
I understand there are severe time constraints at Dr. Narayan's end, and
Yes.
I'll try to have his talk first, order him first, so that at least little convenience we can offer him of whatever we can offer him remotely. So I think we will organize ourselves by giving 10 to 12 minutes to each of our speakers, so that we wrap up in about 40 to 45 minutes, and we can have about 5 to 10 minutes for discussion, and maybe we can have it a little longer if time permits, but we would like to free Dr. Badri as soon as possible. So good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, wherever in different parts of the world you are connected at the moment. We have four speakers with us today, and the theme of the conference is drivers of global economic recovery, and therefore the panel is also driving into the same direction. So as a moderator's prerogative, I would like to make some opening remarks for my panel discussion for the panelists here. So we are looking for growth from the pandemic recovery, and essentially our key interests on this growth drivers would be: what will be the response of this growth in terms of its inclusiveness? Who would be left behind? Would it be V-shaped, U-shaped, K-shaped? And what would be its contour in the coming times? And how would this growth accommodate with itself the changing patterns of foreign trade, whether internationally or domestically, due to logistic constraints, due to trade restrictions, and due to supply chain disruptions that have been emerging, not only in the pandemic, but also prior to that, these things were taking shape already in the global trade world. And also, more importantly, how does this growth take care of our commitment to sustainable development goals? So in my view, the growth that we should see in future should have few characteristics. Most importantly, it should be green growth. It should be greener. It should be compatible with nature and environment and with the mankind. It should be inclusive. I would like to underscore that by inclusiveness, I mean that it should be more balanced in terms of it's engaging domestic sectors, external sector, international sectors. It should be balanced in terms of giving an equal opportunity to enterprises of all sizes, micro, small, medium, large, and so that everybody is participating in this growth process. It should also be equally distributed. At least we should try to make it equitable amongst the primary, secondary, and the tertiary sectors, so that people who are engaged in a specific activity are not excluded in the process. And also it should be equitable amongst the capitalists and the labor, so that the labor income share is not compromised at all, and nor are the interests of those who invest into technology, nor should they be at a gross loss. They should also not be discouraged to undertake such activities, because we see that technology is helping us in a great manner in these pandemics. And one of our speakers, Dr. Badri, is going to take up that in his talk. Another feature of the growth that we should ensure should be that the growth is sustainable, not only in its steadiness of the performance of growth, but it should be compatible to nature and environment and resource consumptions. The growth that we would like to see has to be pandemic resilient. That's the most important lesson which the pandemic is teaching us, that we have to now look for opportunities which are pandemic resilient, which are resistant to such shocks, because we do see such shocks coming in future also. So how can we assess this kind of a resistance? So first of all, identification or tracing or access. So identification is, for instance, in India, we used to talk of Aadhaar system. So we are telling who you are, we are identifying you. But we now also need to know where you are when such crisis hits you. Where are you located, so that in emergent conditions you can be approached, you have access to facilities and government packages. And the third part of identification now is access. That means what are the services that you might need and access? Are you constrained in health services, or do you want to move? Do you need logistics? So these kind of things are now more information which we would need as part of our identification system. Then our jobs, we need to consider how can we create or make the existing jobs more resilient to such pandemics. People like us have been very fortunate to be continuing in our jobs, to be delivering on our work, to be contributing to the economy and the nation sitting at home. But not everybody is as privileged. So we need to take care, we need to look after them, we need to make them more secure in such environment. So what comes here? So social security, which is for migrants and also for resident laborers. And when we talk about issues of migrant labors, the growth should see how the demand and supply of labor is affected in these times. So what can be done, what can be undertaken to avoid such crisis in future? Another characteristic of being pandemic resilient would be how the health system would evolve in future. We have gone back to a system where now curative care becomes important. So there were times when we were trying to go back, move back step and concentrate on nutritional benefits, concentrate on preventive care. But today we see that curative care is most important, because that is what comes in an SOS manner. So our health system needs to be strengthened in many more aspects now. We also need to take care of how can we broad base our supply chains, because they have disrupted, they've broken up not only on the supply side, but also on the demand side. Another aspect of the pandemic resilience would be, what would be the role of new technologies so generally we see that new technologies have a role on resource saving and making our lives convenient. But here, this goes far deeper into our routine lives. So how does a person who's deprived, who's stuck somewhere, gets access to some facility or some help, would be the role of technology. Another aspect would be, what kind of market structures are we going to look forward in future? What kind of market designs are what we are going to want? Because we cannot compromise completely in the name of efficiency. We cannot compromise with the safety and the role of the public sector and the government. Because we see in today's crisis, a lot of initiatives by the government, they are falling short of them. Definitely, there is a dearth of initiatives, but the government has a key role. So the public role becomes much more important in the future. That is my view. My personal view would be that, whether in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of employment, the public intervention, public role cannot be undermined anymore. We see services in health sector. An ambulance is charging about 10,000 rupees to cover a distance of just 3 kilometers. See how the market works. And where is the public system in this? So there's nowhere a role. It has to be. It has to be. The government has to be, more active and present in its future role. With these opening comments, I now invite my first speaker, Dr. Badri Narayan. Dr. Narayan is going to speak on digital sector, in the role of digital sector in economic recovery. For participants and his co-panelists, I would like to inform that please allow Dr. Badri to exit the forum as soon as he has had a talk. so that he can have some rest during the day, during the night time. So in case you have any queries, any questions, any interventions for Badri Narayan's talk, please come forward right away, so that you don't miss upon gaining from any interactions from Dr. Narayan. Dr. Narayan is speaking on digital economy, a sector which is very dynamic, which is widely growing. According to statistics that I am aware, the digital industry in 2020 had a size of $469 billion and is expected to more than double in just coming 5 years. So there's a huge potential. So over to Dr. Badri Narayan. Dr. Narayan, please take over.
Thank you very much, Dr. I'm really grateful for the nice introduction you gave. So I'm going to briefly talk about some recent work I've done. I'm not going to get into a lot of numbers, but just some insights based on a few different aspects. The first is how regarding the general economic recovery from COVID and the public health situation. I think at this moment, it's everybody's guess, particularly when it comes to the second wave that is so strong in India. And many of us must have faced a lot of challenges in the close circles. So that is a question that is still open. We don't know how much the growth is going to be affected. But on the other hand, as Dr. Tandon also mentioned just now, the expansion of digital sector has been phenomenal last year, and it's still expected to expand further. So in this context, I wanted to discuss two different broad areas. One is what is the relationship between this digital transformation and COVID, and there my points of discussion or concern have to do with not necessarily how digital sector has become very prominent because of COVID. That I think many of us know. The main answer is a lot of people are working from home. There's a need for remote, not only remote working in terms of the services industry, but also even in the manufacturing sector, this has happened to a large extent. So that has triggered a lot of demand for digital services. So that is like a very short explanation of why digital sector has become prominent in the context of COVID. But my main focus is how the digital technologies can help us recover from COVID. So that is one thing on the health aspects, the public health aspects. Secondly, how it can also help recover economically, the various other tenets of economic recovery, and including some of the important things that we just discussed before, Dr. Tandon and also Dr. Goyal. We are going to touch upon those aspects. So very briefly, there is in my opinion, there is a lot more that can be gained from things like data science, artificial intelligence, and big data analytics, cloud computing. With all these advanced technologies, there is a lot that can be done, a lot more that can be done to combat COVID than what has been done currently by the governments and the healthcare sector and so on. Because we are in a way, we all got caught in a wrong time and wrong place in a sense, because it's kind of over the time, in the last few years, we never developed this kind of infrastructure. Although we had the technologies, we could not develop this infrastructure because there was no urgent need. Now, in the context of this urgent need, there are some things coming up. We've documented some companies that have come up with AI-based solution. For example, Benevolent AI, the drug company that has come up with recommendations of drugs that can potentially work to combat the virus. It's completely based on AI-based algorithms. Then there is also another company, DeepMind, which is a part of Google AI. They have come up with some AI-based methods to identify the effect of COVID on the various parts of the body, and how can we use targeted drugs that can help resolve these issues. Then another major thing is tracing applications to trace where COVID is spreading, and isolation and so on. So there, Apple and Google have formed partnerships there, and many other efforts are happening. In India, I think Arogya Setu is a good example of that. I don't know how successful it has been, but definitely it has a lot of potential to basically track and help the COVID patients and also the others. And there has also been in places like New York City, there have been some, they developed some algorithms on what are the risk factors for COVID-19 hospitalization. So there are a lot of such research that is also happening using real-time big data analytics and AI and so on. So I can keep on going in this direction. So there are a lot of things that can be done using some of these digital technologies, data analytics, AI, even 3D printing. So 3D printing has become a very efficient way of, for example, manufacturing masks without any human touch involved. So it can be completely automated, and we're just going to print masks instead of manufacturing it properly. So these are some kind of technologies that have been developed recently to basically, which can be, some of them have been developed in the context of COVID. Others have been developed in general, but they may be helpful for COVID recovery from the public health point of view. And there is also another problem is that whenever you talk about data, there is a question of privacy, security, and all these things. So there has to be some kind of set of guidelines that must be developed by the government and public-private partnership and so on. So that is something that's quite, I would say, urgently needed. So now these are all very public health related, COVID recovery related aspects of digital technologies. And another aspect is also the drugs. When you talk about drugs, many times we question the quality and origin of the drugs. And that for that, even Niti Aayog has done like a pilot study a couple of years ago using blockchain to track the supply chain of the drugs that are manufactured. So you can actually be sure that the quality is good and so on. So these are some aspects where, for example, the remdesivir and other drugs that are used in COVID, one can be sure whether that's authentic or not, because that's very important in treating the disease. Okay, now let's quickly go to the second part of my discussion, which is the general contribution of digitalization, digital transformation in economic revival. For this, we did some modeling, economic modeling, and some research along with the Asian Development Bank, which was published. Anybody who is interested, you can email me or ping me. I can send a link to that. I'll try to post it here. But there is a pretty detailed report we did on how digital transformation can help economic revival across the world. So now there are two aspects when it comes to the benefits of digitalization or digital transformation. The first thing is, in simple economic terms, if a sector is expanding, to that extent, the sector is going to contribute to GDP, and you're going to see some economic recovery. So, like Dr. Tandon also pointed out, last year, we see so much growth in digital sectors, and we have seen so much shrinkage in the rest of the economy. So in some ways, the digital sector has been a saving grace. just by the sheer volume of its growth, right? So that is one aspect. Simply expanding a sector is going to contribute to economic recovery to some extent. Second aspect is touching upon the different tenets of the growth. So this sector is not any other sector. The digital sector that is expanding, even if it is like $1 trillion, $500 billion or $1 trillion, whatever it is, it's not just another replica of the current economy growing into $1 more trillion or half a trillion dollars more, but it's a whole new type of economy, which means that it's probably going to correspond with a lot more efficiency. Of course, there is a lot of lot of connotations when it comes to efficiency. Efficiency, generally, economists, we think of efficiency as a good thing, and I too believe in that broadly. But there are some. There is a book called Efficiency Paradox that I would suggest people to look at. That actually talks about how efficiency is kind of like a, in some ways, it is like an oversold kind of term. In a sense, as students of inequality and so on, we already understand that excessive automation, excessive efficiency, and so on, is also going to affect the labor market. The unskilled laborers are going to lose their jobs and so on. So that is another question, like future of work, skill gap between in the labor market that is going to affect the people who are going to flourish from these technologies. That is, I would keep it for another day to discuss about it. There are a lot of points to discuss there, like universal basic income is a point to consider there. Skill development is another point. How to move the laborers from the low skilled state to high skilled over time, how much the government should invest in that, and so on. So that's a different debate. I'm not getting into that, but I'm just recognizing that is a issue to consider. And the second, so I already mentioned that these two things. One is the sheer volume of growth. Second is the nature of growth, which means higher efficiency kind of growth. Typically, if you take any digital technology, it's going to talk about, oh, we are going to do this. What you took like 100 people, we are going to do with 2 people. Or what took you 1 year to manufacture, we are going to manufacture in like 2 days. So these are the kind of the developments that these digital technologies are bringing, and precision and efficiency. So that is when you look at that, and if you look at the past few years, look at the data, how much efficiency has increased because of various digital sectors and whatever growth that they had. What I noticed was that there is a slight increase in productivity to somewhere around like 0.5% to 1%, depending on different sectors and so on, purely coming from increase in digital sector. So like what Dr. Tandon mentioned, in next 5 years, if the digital sector pretty much doubles in size, what would be the corresponding impact on efficiency? So we tried to capture all these things, and we broadly found that there could be almost 5 to 10% higher GDP in the next 5 years globally, just coming from the digital sector contribution. And I'll end my discussion with a couple of challenges and risks that come out of this whole digital transformation, apart from the inequality angle that I just mentioned before. What I talked about before is more about the employment or the labor side of it, but there is also another kind of digital divide, and that is basically, all this digitalization is going to benefit the poor, benefit everyone, provided everyone has access to many of the tenets of digital transformation. For example, access to internet. So we did a study recently on the like a primary survey in India on how students and faculty members are affected because of COVID-related disruptions. And one of the main findings we saw there was people, the poorer people, people from lower socioeconomic conditions, and geographical regions which are less developed. Those are the ones who are most vulnerable. And others probably they can benefit a lot, but others like these vulnerable sections of the society and the economy, they should be taken care of if the digital sector has to benefit everyone. And definitely, there, like what Dr. Tanner mentioned, this Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile JAM, that is as called in India. This trio is already revolutionizing access to various resources by the people, to the people, but again that is limited to how much access they have to various resources going forward. Until now, things are relatively fine, but going forward, how is it going to happen? The last aspect I want to mention is the data privacy and cyber security aspect. So globally, increasingly, many governments are coming up with stricter regulations on data security and these aspects, privacy aspects. My personal thought here is definitely there should be strong regulations, but at the same time, these regulations should be more as like they should not take the the shape of guilty until proven kind of shape, which they should be more like innocent until proven. So if there are problems, they should be raised, and then the companies could be penalized. But you should not begin with suspicion that the digital platforms are all bad and they're all going to violate those regulations and so on. That is one thing to think of. And yeah, I will end my discussion for now, and any questions I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Badri, for a very informative talk on digital economy. In fact, I would have asked, you've already answered the question that I had in my mind, that we all see a lot of presence of digitization efforts and digital economy is more, I find those gains happening more in the service segment, and we often talk about digitization in manufacturing, but I didn't have a very clear view of, other than pharma production goods or other than use of very sophisticated machine in manufacturing, how relatively less at digitization at a relatively low level could be could be working in manufacturing sector, where your example of 3D printing of masks is a wonderful example that helps me understand this much better. If anybody else has any questions, particularly for Dr. Narayanan, please bring them forward right away so that he can take a leave in a short while from now. I don't see any queries in the chat, nor I do see any hands up. So I think, Dr. Badri Narayan, I would like to thank you for a very nice and compact conversation, and that you have accommodated the request at a very uncomfortable hour. So thank you so much. So from my end, you're welcome to continue with us, but just in case you do wish to catch up on your sleep, stay safe wherever you are and keep in touch. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Badri. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just posted the link, if anyone is interested, the link to the whole report on the ADB report we wrote on digital.
Yes.
Thank you very much again. I'll try to stay, but I'll keep my video open.
It's all right. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to hearing the other panelists also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would now invite Dr. Jutatip as our next speaker. Dr. Jutatip indicated that she would like to present an overview of global economic recovery, and she has a very she's proposed a wider coverage to cover issues on vaccine rollout, contribution of trade liberalization, and a proper use of the stimulation package. That's a very topical thing where I myself look forward to listening to her. How can we create the growth process to be more resilient, especially through diversification measures? So, Dr. Dutta, please, your time, over to you.
So thank you, Dr. Anjali, for introducing me. And I would like to thank organizer, Dr. Sanjay in particular, for inviting me as one of the panelists in the panel sessions. With the time limitations, I would like to go straight to my point. I have the 4 points that I would like to talk. I thought that the 4 points will support the sustained global recovery. The first one, I think Dr. Miyamiki already covered, but I would like to look for this one from the developing country perspectives. The first one, and I think the most important thing now for the global recovery, is a vaccine rollout and also development of effective treatment. Fortunately, I think we can develop the vaccine with some certain efficacy rate with the noticeably short period of times. However, I think right now you still have 3 key issues to address for the vaccines. The first one is the ability of developing countries, including Thailand, to access the vaccines. I think to access the vaccine, two sides need to work together. One is the government in developing country itself, which need to have a good plans to access the vaccine. I think including the budget preparations, choice of vaccines, weighting between its effectiveness and safety. And if possible, I think the government should allow the private sector to help finding the vaccines to reduce the burden to the government. I think this is a long-term solution because we likely to have the second round of the vaccine jab, or maybe have to be annual for the vaccine jab to prevent the COVID. As you know that the vaccine might be last only the 6 months from the vaccines company. For the Southeast Asian countries, I think Singapore is a good example regarding vaccine preparations. The country started to vaccinate her citizens in the early January this year. And as of the mid of the April, the share of people who received at least one shot was almost 20% of total populations. And this is ahead of the world rate. And the country right now are prepared to produce the vaccine and be a hub to export the vaccines to the other Asian countries. Sanofi, the French company, plan to invest or build a factory in Singapore in the 3rd quarter this year. I haven't said that all countries should produce vaccine if you don't have any comparative advantage, right? India, you have comparative advantage about the vaccine. I think you can go ahead with that, but maybe not in terms of Thailand. But I just would like to emphasize that the country need to prepare for that amidst the growing needs for the biomedicines and the second round of the vaccinations, or maybe the annual vaccination that we needed. For Thailand, right now, the vaccination rate is only the 0.7%. It's quite very low. And right now we're facing the 3rd wave of COVID infections. So I think the Thai government try to speed up the vaccine process. And now government invite the private sector to join in finding the vaccines and maybe get the vaccine distribution. I think this is a long-term solution for many developing countries. And aside from the supply of the vaccine, another one is another side from the government in the country, in the developing country itself. Another side is a supply of the vaccine. I think enough supply of the vaccines with the proper price to developing country is important. We must realize that sustained recovery from the pandemic would not occur if we cannot have an equal access to the vaccines. Tourism and aviation industry cannot fully function for sure. Accelerating the COVAX program, I think this will help developing countries. As far as I know right now, the program is slow to secure the vaccine deal and deliver those to the countries. So I think this one, with the help of developed countries, this program can be accelerated and will be benefit for the developing countries. The second point for the vaccine that I would like to address is the vaccine nationalisms. Vaccine nationalism that I concerns is not in terms of the government side agreement with the pharmaceutical manufacturer to supply their own populations. But what I concern the most is when the government make explicit agreement with the local manufacturers to promote and protect the global market share for their vaccines. For example, if you would like to get the visa, you need to be vaccinated by our country-made vaccines. I think this one, if occur, it will have like a widespread repercussions. And I think could trigger something is called vaccines passport war. And this would severely affect the path of the economic growth. And regarding the vaccines passport, I thought that maybe encouraging the multilateral or multilateral agreement rather than the bilateral agreement on approved vaccines for using as a vaccine passport would become more efficient and possibly reduce the vaccine nationalisms. I think global cooperation is more important to protect this kind of thing. And the last point, I think is really important for the vaccines. I think developing countries need to prepare more budget for possible second round vaccinations. I think as I already mentioned, vaccine tend to be last maybe only 6 months and progress of vaccine distribution is very low. So if global herd immunity would not take place yet, maybe the second round vaccination needed and budget need to be prepared, especially for developing countries. As well, the COVAX programs, I think need to think about this kind of thing for the second round vaccinations and need to prepare for the budget and ask more budget from the developed countries and try to secure those to the middle and the low income countries. I think this is really crucial, right? And I would like to put the footnote that along the effective vaccine, I think development of effective treatments, drugs are also crucial for the sustained economic recoveries. Right now, I think many companies are paying attention on this aspect, and I'm happy that we go for this kind of path also. For the second point that I would like to address is about the continued trade liberalizations, right? So people talk about the global value chains that they might be disrupted and they might not happen anymore. But as far as my research with Archanans, we found that we use the trade data with the HS code at 6 digits and look in various products, right? Including the electronics, like electrical appliances, and also the automotive sector in terms of parts and components. We found that the global value chain still continue. Though the chain may become shorter and firm may diversify sourcings more within the regions, but global value chains still continue. And if the global value chains still continue, trade protections, like both in terms of tariff or non-tariff barrier in a particular country, will result in a noticeable increase in cost and price of such product. And this will as well affect consumer and country welfare for sure, right? So I think Mia already point out in the morning about the vaccine. For the vaccines, you know that vaccines are trade interdependent, right? Companies have to source product from various countries to produce the vaccines, right? And vaccines right now, even though the tariff or the vaccine itself is relatively low, around 5% on average, right, for the global. But the tariff on vaccine-related input are still high. Some are higher than 10%, such as the stabilizers and distribution material. So this will increase the cost of the vaccines, especially for a developing country and low-income countries. So if the trade protection has been reduced, we think that we might be able to access the vaccine at the cheaper price than this one. Multilateralism is preferred choice for sure for trade liberalizations, but political constraint, maybe we cannot go for that, even though we try to go for the WTO, but it takes time. Regionalisms with simple rule of origins and involved with the countries, various regions, I think this could probably be the second best for us. Thailand just signed the recent trade agreements or RCEP, and India haven't been in the agreement yet. Although we already have the agreements with all of these countries that we sign, we have the ASEAN China, we have like the agreement with Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and also South Korea already. But we hope that including more countries within the agreement would help to reduce the possible trade diversions and to harness our the competitive advantage through the supply chain network, right? And another point that I would like to point out is the increase in the non-tariff measure. Right now, the trade barrier more in terms of the non-tariff barrier, especially in terms of the technical barrier or TBT, and the sanitary and phytosanitary or SPS. And right now, the tariff reduced significantly. Non-tariff measure become more like important. Food and agriculture products are subject to more the SPSS, while manufacturing products are subject more to the TBT. I know undoubtedly these regulations are important to protect health and safety of the citizen, but there are areas where duplications and cumbersome process within and across countries still exist. Mapping the relevant regulations, processes, and approval for access to different markets would for sure help reduce unnecessary trade costs. For ASEANs, we have Mutual Recognition Agreement or MRA, which it helps to reduce the cumbersome regulations and process that relevant to the non-tariff measure. But right now, the products coverage are still limited. We have only the prepared food stuff, electronics, electrical machinery, and cosmetic, medical, and recently we just signed the automotive products. We need to go beyond these products, especially in terms of the food stuff, that we include only the HS 16 to 22, but the non-tariff measure that put on the food stuff is start from like a 01, HS 01, right, until HS 16 and HS 03. In the ASEAN country have been like affected a lot from the developed country. So we need to have this kind of thing. And the agreement, I think, may need to go beyond the ASEANs as the export-import destinations of our product is like not within the ASEANs, but go to other developed countries. Right? This is my second point, that you need like a liberalization and you need to take into account the non-tariff measure. The third point that Dr. Anjali say, I think like a proper use of fiscal and monetary policies really crucial, right, for the global economic recovery. I do believe that fast recovery of individual country will help support global economic recovery. Amid the pandemics, expansionary fiscal and monetary policy have been implemented worldwide. Right? Massive stimulus packages have been implemented in almost all countries. We need to have a proper plan to use such stimulus package. Support affected firms and households, especially for the low-income citizens, are crucial. But too much emphasis on the cash handling scheme, like by ignoring medium to long-term growth objective, could jeopardize country competitiveness and medium to long-term economic growth, right? I think two areas that we need to emphasize very much, right? One is policy that relating to the labor market, especially training and matching labor back into the job market. I think this one the government should prioritize because right now the job loss in all the country, including Thailand, is significant. In Thailand, job loss is 3 times, right? Last year, increased 3 times last year. I think it's quite significant. Training and skill upgrading is necessary and really important, especially in a situation where technology innovation has become more crucial, right? So in Thailand, we use the labor force survey and we look the effects of technology, right, on the labor market. And we look at the reallocations of the worker. And we found that technology not necessarily lead to the displacement effects as many people worry. Instead, when we introducing the technology advancement, they can lead to the reallocations of worker. And we found that if we train or we upgrade the worker, right, they can stay in the job market and relocate to the higher positions under the technological advancement and environments and can have the higher payments. So training is very important. And in this regard, I think cooperation with private sector is necessary and should do to ensure that the training that we provide is matched well with the demand in the market, right? And another thing is during the pandemic, to match the labor back into the job market, government may need to provide the incentive to the private firm to bringing the worker that already trained back into the company. I think Singapore have this kind of incentive. If you would like to bring the people that already trained back into the job market, you will get like the exemptions, for example, corporate tax exemptions or income tax exemption for some certain periods. So I think government may need to provide some incentive to bring the like a trained worker back into the market. And another one that I think is important is infrastructure, especially infrastructure that support economy moving toward the industrial 4.0. And the country need to invest in the investment project that the country have like a comparative advantage. For example, in Thailand, we have comparative advantage in terms of food, electronics, electrical appliances, and automotive sector. So the government should pay attention on that and bring more technology into the sector from upstream to downstream. Law and regulation also may need to be changes. For the food sector, for example, technology should go into the first stage of the like agriculture production, like the seed development that Thailand right now still import a lot of seed, right? And we need to use technology go until the end, like of the production, like the food packaging, because right now the non-tariff barrier is come to play, like I say. And the food packaging is very important, like to pass the SPS from developed country. And this one technology can come to help to reduce or to pay attention in terms of the hygiene, pay attention of in terms of the contaminations, right? And another sector in Thailand is automotive sector that I think you all know that Thailand is a hub of producing an export vehicle that we use the internal combustion technology. But now we would like to move toward the green technology. We thought that tariff and tax structure in Thailand may need to adjust to provide the proper incentive for firms to gradually adjust or change production technology. Right now, we have a lot of cars that import from China through the ASEAN-China FTA with the very no tariff, right? So if we allow that kind of thing to happen, I thought that the incentive for firms, right, to produce the clean vehicle in the economy might be like in questions. And another thing that we need to think is how to ensure that we have the supply of battery in moving to the green vehicle, especially for the pure electric car. We will use the lithium ion battery or we'll go for the like a sodium ion battery. I think this one India also have this kind of issue. Meanwhile, I think the government with collaboration with the private sector, I would like to stress with the collaboration with the private sector should prepare for the infrastructure, including the land allotment for charging the infrastructure along with mandating charging infrastructure in mall, housing society and office complex. Right, and this one we can have the smooth path like from the internal combustion toward the producing electric car. Last point that I think is quite important is how to ensure the resilient growth, right? So I think when we talk about resilient growth, we have many aspects, right? We need to have food security. We need to have the medicine security. And another one, we need to have like some diversifications. So I would like to touch on the last one about the diversifications, right? So I think the pandemic now make many entrepreneurs to think about their diversified source of finance, business, and bringing technology to use in their business. For example, tourism sector in Thailand that has been affected a lot began to look at the food sector and try to turn back to the domestic market. Exporter in Thailand also began to find more market to diversify their income, while importer began to source material from many places. I think such diversification could lead to like a resilient growth in the medium to longer terms, right? What I would like to state here, right, is a diversification to some certain extent is the private sector decisions, right? Entrepreneur would like to diversify source of finance, bringing technology into the business. Export sector would like to diversify their income to find more like a market. So what the government should do is to act as a good facilitator. I should act as a good facilitator in support such diversification, especially in terms of like a law and regulations, in terms of the infrastructure, especially one that toward digital economy. So I would like to like provide one example in Thailand. So Thailand is good in the food sector, and we have the comparative advantage in the food sector. And after the pandemic, we plan to move toward something is called innovation hub for food and moving toward the more healthy food, right? So to moving to like a innovation hub or healthy food, we need to have like a enough quality of plant-based proteins like the soybean. But currently, the government in Thailand imposed the quota, and tariff that placed for the product that we import out of the quota noticeably high, right? So these have two repercussions in Thailand. One is the productivity in producing soybean in the country would not much be improved, like due to the long protections from the government. And the second one is only few countries that we import the products. So if we would like to build the resilience and we would like to be the food innovation hub, maybe the Thai government need to gradually reduce the quota and reduce the tariff like out of the quota, right? So all in all, I think for me, 4 points are quite important, right? I would like to just address only 4 points. One is vaccine rollout in developing countries. Second is you need to continue for trade liberalizations. Third one, you need like the proper use for the fiscal stimulus, not only look for the short terms, like consumption or cash handout, but you need to take into account the long terms, medium to long term economic growth objectives. And the last one, you think about resilience and diversification is important, but government may need to pay only for the good facilitator. The decisions to diversify, maybe you have to give to the private sector. However, right now, I think we still need to like have the social distancing, wear masking. We need to have testing, tracing, because right now the vaccines, the one who received the vaccine or the share of people who received the vaccine is still relatively small, and global herd immunity haven't happened yet. So I would like to stop here for my thought. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jutadip, for the very forward-looking observations and comments. In fact, two of your points are most relevant. The point that we have missed so far is that we are looking for either the first shot of the vaccine, or those who have got the first shot, we are looking for the second shot of the vaccine. But we are forgetting that the effectiveness of the vaccine is not lifelong. This has a term attached to it. And what would happen? So this entire process, this entire requirement of the first and the second shot would be required 9 months, 6 months, 1 year, henceforth. And so we really need to be prepared for this requirement in future. That's an excellent, far-sighted observation to have brought forward to this panel. I'm really thankful to you for that. And your point on a judicious and a careful expenditure of the utilization of the stimulus package. So it should not be driven by short-term interests. Of course, they are needed when people are starving because of for instance, those daily wage earners are starving because if they don't earn today, so they need an immediate relief. But we also need to be working in the long run as part of our resilient policies and mechanisms, that if we keep on feeding the fish to the people, they'll stop working. We need to teach them how to catch the fish. So that goes in the larger interest. That's my takeaway from your observations. And I really enjoyed your talk, and it was a very learning experience also. Thank you so much. Are there any observations, comments, queries for Dr. Jutatit? If not, then I would straight away seamlessly jump to our next speaker, Professor Faisal Ahmed. And Professor Faisal Ahmed is going to talk on geopolitics. He's going to touch upon TPP, RCEP issues, as I'm informed early, and supply chain resilience mechanism. So over to Professor Ahmed. Please take your time and enlighten us.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Anjali. So now we have heard about economics, we have heard about digitalization, and we have also heard about vaccines. So I think it's time to now hear a little bit about geopolitics too, because this is something which is actually driving the whole world, crazy now, and also will do so in the times to come. So to begin with, I would put it very directly that global economic recovery is not merely about economics or vaccine, right? It's about geopolitics too. And first, we have to understand that how these geopolitical forces have shaped up over the years. Like, it is the first and the most important thing, what we need to understand is we need to understand what President Trump was doing actually, because this COVID crisis originated that time when there was a trade war also going on. And all these things have a huge impact on the, global economic environment. So how he shaped the global geopolitics. So in the name of America First, we have seen that President Trump actually reduced American power status in the Indo-Pacific and compromised with America's position of strength, which America has always talked about, due to his impulsive diplomacy, which was largely running through something called a half-baked tweets. So in 2020, whether it was a talk about a possible, withdrawal from the Guam, which is a territory of the United States in the Pacific, or it was about the withdrawal from the visiting forces agreement of the Philippines, which after that did not happen. United States has largely shown a withdrawal syndrome. And that was especially at a time when the allies needed the US in the Indo-Pacific the most. So whether it was like, I give you some instances, whether it was like the withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the withdrawal from the Paris agreements, or threatening to withdraw from NATO and WTO, or blocking the appointment of judges in the WTO's appellate body, or there was a decision to reduce aid to the WHO, World Health Organization. All these steps have actually reduced the position of strength which allies has been looking for. Now, all these situations create a very typical type of global architecture in which the institutional backing is actually lost. So restoring global frameworks and institutions today become very important. Recovery cannot happen through popular perceptions. Recovery cannot happen through social media debates. Recovery has to happen through institution-backed mechanisms. And that is where we need to understand the power rivalry which is happening between the United States and China in terms of great power game or great power competition that we call about, which is going to have a repercussion on the way we look forward to an economic recovery. So therefore, what happens is, if you look at China, China has continued to be an adversary for the United States. China has continued to be a systemic rival for the European Union. But when Mr. Biden comes in and his Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, says that they are willing to cooperate with China also, right? When they can cooperate, They are willing to, have adversarial relations with China when it must be, when such a situation arises. And they are also willing to compete with China whenever required. So this is how today's policy is shaping up. European Union sees China as a systemic rival, but let us not forget that it was the European Union we signed a investment agreement in 2020. Just last year during the pandemic, the European Union signed an investment agreement with already with China. Also at the same time, China's global competitiveness has been there despite the trade war. It was the result of hosting a robust and specialized supply chains. Like some speakers have been talking about supply chains and the global value chains. The previous speaker also talked about. So that has a robust and specialized supply chain across sectors, and their ability for small and medium enterprises to continuously upgrade themselves in the value chain. So that ability is something which is very crucial. So therefore, the SME's ability to cater to low-income countries on a mass scale and simultaneously adhere to some stringent quality and safety norms to meet American requirements, all these things are already there. Now, a closer look, if you try to look at the impact of the trade war and the lockdowns and pandemic-induced lockdowns which has happened, we'll find that everything was almost over in China in March of 2020, and they started reviving their factories and all. So in fact, despite some firms wanting to shift their manufacturing base for the value chains, activities from China, or whether they are following a, China plus one narrative or any other model, the challenges like the lacuna of the scale of operations, or you can say the inherent supply side constraints and supply side disruptions in the economies of this region, they are still safeguarding Chinese competitiveness. So therefore, we have to understand that even is the flagship. I mean, we have been talking about something called a Belt and Road Initiative over the years. So that has been a flagship infrastructure project for China, which has faced financial and operational difficulties, but that is also set to revive now. We have to understand the realities, how things are moving across. Normally, the American discourse terms it as a debt trap, but the American discourse does not offer an alternative solution. Whether they talk about a free and open Indo-Pacific, or you're talking about a blue dot network or something, but where is an alternative network that an American discourse is providing in response to the BRI? So therefore, and why do we consider the perspective only of middle income and high income economies? We have to consider in this case, in the geopolitical aspect, the perspectives of the low and small economies as well, low income and smaller economies. For example, you talk about Bhutan, even you talk about some developing countries also. But you talk about Bhutan, you talk about Nepal, you talk about Sri Lanka, you talk about most of the ASEAN countries like Cambodia, Laos, and others. And you also talk about countries in the Central Asia like Kazakhstan, or talk about countries in Africa and elsewhere. They too have a perspective. Let us not undermine that perspective. So they too have a perspective, and for them, getting infrastructural investment is a top priority, and it is the national interest too. So they will not drift away from China at this moment of time, and they will continue to be receiving those investments from China. And at the same time, they will not drift away from the United States either. So because it is the national interest, so they will look for countries, whether it is China or United States, whoever provides them those infrastructural investment and meets their national interest to whatever level possible, they will continue to be supportive toward all of them. They will not be choosing exactly the sides at the moment, and at the same time, they will not be drifting away from China. So this point also we have to understand, because as we have seen that in the national security strategy of the United States, which came in 2017 itself, President Trump and the US dispensation very categorically mentioned it, that the Russia and China are adversaries for the United States. And also the same strategy document mentions that China is trying to displace the United States as a power in the Indo-Pacific region. China is trying to displace the United States as a power in the Indo-Pacific region. So this is a great power rivalry actually. That rivalry will also, shape up the way things happen. Look at the trade war. Trade war has disrupted a lot of value chains even before pandemic happened, right? And it has shaped a lot of, ways. So therefore, we cannot ignore this very important aspect, that geopolitics between the United States and China, the power rivalry, which is a great power rivalry that is happening, if it does not subside, the global recovery is perhaps not an easy path. Now, the second point that I will talk about is about the TPP RCEP. Now, and of course, the supply chain resilience that we are talking about. So what happens is, see, in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we have seen the Trans-Pacific Partnership came up at a time when President Obama was there, and he was trying to find, he felt that East Asian countries are, becoming very closer to China, and therefore, the East Asia or East Asian or the ASEAN countries are depriving the United States of a role in the region. That was the time when actually President Obama, after the 2009 East Asia Summit, started pushing strongly for something called a Trans-Pacific Partnership. TPP was already there. It was a group of 4 countries in 2005, but then he brought in 4, 5, 6 more countries to start that negotiation, renegotiation process, and so that it can become a region-wide, integration effort of the Asia Pacific. But what happened was, he talked about the TRIPS Plus commitment to deliberately keep China out. Now, that was the time when I wrote a piece in the Economic Times in which I argued that China should have been part of the Trans-Pacific. There is no point in China keeping out of the TPP in 2011. The reason being, if you look at Peru, look at all the smaller countries, Peru was there in the TPP, right? So Peru's nearest, neighbor is the United States, but its largest trading partner was China. So for most of the countries who were there as part of the TPP, their largest trading partner was China, but you are forming a group in which China is out and you are forming a group. How will that group sustain? Because will they not start trading with their largest trading partner? Now, this conceptualization was actually taken up later in response from China. After the TPP negotiation started, China formed it in 2012. So in 2012, RCEP was negotiated. And the discourse at that time was whether it is a United States-led TPP or China-led RCEP. So bringing together, what we are talking about today, that is the concept of ASEAN centrality and all, bringing the ASEAN at the forefront and all its trading partners with whom it has its FTA together. So that was how the RCEP was formed. But in 2017, we have seen that President Trump pulls out of the TPP negotiation. And in 2019, we see that India pulls out of the RCEP negotiation, right? Now, the point is that if mega regionalism is so important, and if China, we have talked about, like, China has been, about all those corona issues, we are familiar with that. A American narrative came against China that was part of the great power game and likely to happen. But look at the aspects. 2020, the RCEP was signed. The RCEP was signed after the COVID came in. It was not signed before COVID. Before COVID, it was negotiated and finalized, but it was signed after during the COVID was there. And when the COVID was there, countries like you have seen Japan, Korea, they have not preferred to opt out because China is there. Even if China was there, they have been giving, incentivizing the companies. Japan has been incentivizing this company to come out of China, move supply chain out of China. But they joined the RCEP knowing that China is there during the pandemic. This is something which meets their national interest. So therefore, if you look at our discourse, we have been relying too much on Japan and other countries. They have their own national interest. Let us understand this. I mean, what they work is for their own national interest. They don't work for our national interest. We have to work for our national interest. right? So they have their own national interest. They felt that it even despite all those narrative, it was better for them to be with China. So they continued with China in the RCEP, joined RCEP in 2020. So if it is a case of mega regionalism, right? So one side you have the RCEP, one side you have the TPP. We have seen UK has expressed its interest to join the TPP, though it's not a trans-Pacific country. It's in the Atlantic, but still it has expressed its interest. China itself has expressed interest to join the TPP. Now this is again very peculiar thing, because if China joins the TPP and the RCEP, it is already there, right? So then what happens, right? And what is the point in being out of it, right? And what about trade creation? What about trade diversion? Are we not thinking about these things? So we also have to consider these things, that global economic recovery, India is a very dominant economic power, right? Of course, we can say that in terms of GDP calculations and maybe top 6, top 5, we can do like this. But among that, India is a dominant economic power. So what is the point in we being out of a mega regionalism when it is happening, and when our allies, who we supposed to be allies, Japan, Korea, everyone is joining hands with China? That is one. The second is we formed a supply chain resilience initiative. It's called the SCRI, right? There was it is still in the discourse, policy discussion and all. So supply chain resilience initiative. Now, supply chain resilience initiative was to move away, supply chains from China and reduce dependence on China. Now, for Japan, let us understand that for Japan and Korea, SCRI works, but for us, it doesn't provide a level playing field. I mean, if Japan shifts its, bases, supply chains and manufacturing units, where will it shift? It will move to Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, which are all ASEAN countries and which are, by the way, in the RCEP, along with China. So for them, it is absolutely okay that they shift from China and move to Malaysia. How does it matter to Japan? If you talk about Korea, Korea will again, where will it shift? It will again go to ASEAN country. So for Korea also, it makes sense that, okay, it will shift. What about our companies? I mean, we shift from China, where do we go? And we are not part of that ASEAN. So can we only rely on India-ASEAN FTA provisions and not, RCEP? And we rely only on India-ASEAN provisions, and that India-ASEAN provisions also, we are compelled to believe that it has not benefited us, so we want to renegotiate that. So this is the second aspect that I talked about. The first one, we have to understand the global, US, China, great power rivalry and how it is affecting and recovery of the, global economy. Then the mega regionalism, TPP, RCEP, or the supply chain resilience and all. One more very briefly, I like to touch a point, if ma'am, you allow me just 1 minute time. So that is about the climate change. There is no solution to a global economic recovery without understanding the challenges which are being posed by climate change today. If you look at the climate change scenario across the Indian Ocean, across the Pacific Ocean, all the countries are suffering because of that, and you do not have a sustainable solution. So therefore, we need to work on that. I'll take the example of few countries which are called the small island developing states. That is the SIDS countries of the. So we have SIDS countries in the South Pacific. We have those in the Indian Ocean like Mauritius and Maldives. And we also have those in the Caribbean. So if you look at those countries in the South Pacific, we have Vanuatu, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Nauru, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, Fiji. All these countries, if you look at that, they face one of the most severe climate change challenges. And these challenges range from, something like, related to ocean acidification, coral reef damage, sea level rise, water and vector-borne diseases coming up. The exclusive economic zone issues are there, which are related to overfishing and all. And most importantly, the climate refugee crisis. Like Kiribati president purchased, land in Fiji to shift his whole, island country population in case the sea level rises and the island submerges into the sea. So that climate refugee aspect is also there. Therefore, there is a human development element in understanding the global economic recovery as well. We cannot ignore the small island, the low income countries, the vulnerable economies, the least developed countries, and still believe that economic recovery can be driven by a few of the countries of the world. It is actually not possible. So therefore, climate change also continues to be a major threat which needs to be handled in the process so that we can advance toward a global economic recovery. So that's all was my take on this issue. So I thank you for the time given to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Faisal. This was yet again a very thorough panelist, one after the other, making the panel discussion even more richer with his inputs on geopolitics, which was also very informative for me. I have one query for you. So what is your view? Should India have joined RCEP?
See, why we did not join RCEP, we have been looking for 2-3 reasons. One is like we were trying for a better services deal, right? So because we were good in services, and that was a services deal that we have been trying for.
Yeah.
Secondly, the point is that why we were wary of it is because of the industry concern. Like if you look at 2018 discourse, 2019, the government narrative I'm talking about, exactly the policy narratives you talk about 2018, early 2019, the government was ready to sign because we have been negotiating it since 2012. We have been doing it. Why we backed out was the industry concerns. The only point what I suggested that because there was huge possibility and every country was welcoming of India joining the RCEP.
Yes.
We could have actually bargained time in 2019 instead of giving a decision we don't want to join. And had we bargained time, in hindsight, if you see from now, had we bargained time, it could have been relatively better for us. And countries would have been more than willing to give India time to, fulfill its requirements to be a part of that. So services deal was okay. Now, second is, if you look at the industry concerns, right? So industry concerns will never be over unless we go for domestic reforms.
True.
And that industrial domestic reforms have to be like, if you look at this, our participation in global value chains, right? It is actually dismal. I mean, if you look at the data, I'm just talking about the data wise, if you go through it, it will be dismal. So our priority has been, have to be SME development, small and medium enterprises, and help them internationalize their operations to be picked by the lead firms. Our SMEs are not picked by the lead firms. That is the challenge that we are facing, right? So now today the scenario is, there is a TPP, CPTPP is there now. So now when Mr. Biden comes in, had Mr. Trump been there, so there was no possibility at all in coming back. But with Mr. Biden coming in, there is a possibility that he may like to come back to the TPP.
Yes.
In times
that interest is being expressed in media reports. I saw that.
Exactly. I wrote some article way back, even before he was elected president, that there is a possibility he might come back. If he comes back, India will have a win-win situation to choose between RCEP and TPP. So why we should not go for such type of negative notion that we don't want to be part of a regional.
And in your view, can India take a clear stand by choosing between TPP and RCEP? I mean, we don't have that kind of a bold diplomacy where we, of exclusions. We are rather more nuanced, and we try to be very balanced and safeguard ourselves from, both angles. So do you think given a choice between TPP and RCEP, would our government actually take a call? Or
I think RCEP is always open.
Yes.
Right. You can always go into RCEP. Right.
Anytime.
Now my concern is only that, do we prefer to remain outside of the mega regionalism? I mean, the point is that what we need to, develop a narrative that we can't prefer to remain outside the mega regionalism, but we should get a better deal, right?
Sure.
So we actually need to strive for a better deal. So if we start negotiating TPP negotiation will not happen so quickly, right? So there also we have to negotiate a better deal. RCEP also we have to negotiate a better deal. So whichever gets you a better deal, and one group starts giving India a better, because India is very, it is located as a position that every group would actually like to have India within.
Absolutely.
As part of that.
So
that is the point.
Yeah. We are probably not a taker straight up.
Yes, and for us also, it makes sense that why do we want to divert the trade which is happening from those countries which are not our FTA partners like New Zealand and others? Because tomorrow when they enter into RCEP and 92%, 93%, trade lines are open, their trade import from India might be diverted to somewhere inside the RCEP, maybe some other country from the RCEP. So we have to see, I think, that possibility as well. It's not that we are very, eager to join the group. All the groups would be very keen to have India on board. But at the same time, considering our national interest, we should be prepared not to remain outside both the groups if anything like that happens.
I agree. That preparedness has to be coming from within. That will not come from outside.
Exactly.
That is what has to happen. So thank you so much. With that, I right away ask Dr. Sanjay Mangla to make his make his comments on the points on the topic of his choice. So maybe 10 minutes should be fine for you, if that's all right.
I'll take even very less.
Okay.
Than that, because since morning we have, I think, listened to more or less each and every aspect of the problem, and then how we can resolve it, be it from the perspective of international trade, geopolitical aspects, rollout of vaccines, efficient use of fiscal stimulus packages, or even monetary policy. For me, I have 2-3 important concerns that the whole world is absolutely trying hard to recover their own economies and then in aggregate form the global economy. But the first very major concern that I find is that how long this crisis is going on. None of us, and even scientists, are not in a position to predict that how long it is going to be. Since we have first lockdown last year, now again, the situation is even more worse. So there is high uncertainty about closing down the economic activities in various countries. And we are seeing that situation in our own country right now. This is number one. Number two is the problem of migrant laborers. We had seen it last year that I think more or less all the migrant laborers moved back to their hometowns and villages when the country was under lockdown. And it took a long time for them to come back and then again get settled down. But now, in anticipation of the future lockdowns, the migrant laborers have started going back to their homes. Third point is that, the government, I was talking to Jutadeep some other day, that the governments are allowing and encouraging people to work from home. But the problem is that in a country like India and similar countries, even more than 80% or about 90% of workforce work in the informal sector. My office or my institution is closed down, then it has stopped so many ancillary activities which are being run nearby the institute and earning bread to so many of people. So how we are going to tackle that problem? Can we allow everybody to work from home? But that is not possible. So we have to think about it, that though I accept that in GDP for a country like India, the major contribution is by services sector, approximately 65%. But if you take it in terms of the employment to the people, this is actually the agricultural allied activities and then the small and medium enterprises, which are under biggest threat right now. So the point is that the Jutadeep talked very clearly that we should be using these fiscal stimulus packages very appropriately. But I think that should be majorly utilized for reviving the small and medium enterprises, because that is which constitute about 90% or 95% of the total enterprises in our country and provide a large number of employment to the people. So we, as a policymakers, the government has to see that how to revive this particular sector. Then, of course, the demand by the consumers. Last year, when the situation got slowed down in the month of August or September, then fortunately in India, we had so many festivals in line, be it Diwali or something else, and people spent a lot of amount of money in the market. But last year, people definitely, like to my opinion, people had used a lot of their savings to survive in that situation. But at the time right now, because last year the situation was such that we all had faced such situation for the very first time in our life, and to maintain our status of living, to meet out our at least mandatory expenditures, most of the people use their savings. And now we are not left with savings. We are not even able to meet out our operational expenditure with our current flow of income. And that is, I'm talking about the people who are belonging to the service sector. Forget about those who are daily earners, daily wage earners. So I think from the policy perspectives, it is very important to see that how we are going to revive that particular sector, which is constituting the informal employment in a country like India and even Thailand for that matter. And second point is very important, is that now we need a greater and greater international cooperation among various countries, where the multilateral organizations have a big role to play to facilitate trade, particularly in the sectors of health and information technology. Because this is the digital economy, which is being able to keep the economies running even when the economies are closed down. And then, of course, the government must cooperate for production and an equitable access to drugs and vaccinations of this problem. Because as the Jutatip rightly said, that we might need another round of vaccination after 6 months, as there is no surety that the single dose or 2 doses of vaccination will be sufficient for the whole life. So that means definitely governments need budget for that. But I think as so many of the developing countries do not have manufacturing capacities for these kind of drugs and medicines, so I think there is a bigger role to play for countries like India or US or even China for that matter, to help our partners, our developing countries, to get out of this situation. So they were my brief comments, Dr. Anjali. Thank you very much for the session.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank all the 4 panelists. We've had a very diverse panel, and which has been a total gain for all of us. With that, I bring the session to close. I
think Ms. Kamna can take over for 1 or 2 minutes, and then the session will be over.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such valuable, informative discussion session amongst the think tanks of the global economy. Identification system, diversification, industry concerns, climate change, problem of migrant laborers, revival of SMEs, and many more are the key factors which needs to be considered for global economy recovery. Thank you so much, Anjali ma'am. Now I would like to invite Dr. Praveen Kumar Gupta, Head of Department of Law, Maharaja Agrasen Institute of Management Studies, to propose vote of thanks. Dr. Gupta, currently an Associate Professor and Head, Department of Law, joined MAIMS on 1st August 2018. Prior to this, he enjoyed the honor of senior most founding faculty members and officiating principal of Vesh College of Law, run by 100-year-old prestigious Vesh Education Society, Rohtak. He also worked for quite some time as a faculty and academic counselor at Bhai Guru Das College of Law, Punjab, in year 2010. Also, sir was a part-time faculty at Innovative Institute of Law, Greater Noida. Sir has been awarded PhD in 2008 after completing 3 years of law course in 2001 and LLM in 2004 from Department of Law, MDU, Rohtak. He has also enjoyed practical exposure in civil, labor, matrimonial, consumer, and attribution law, along with the exposure of handling of writ petitions at Punjab and Haryana High Court, at Chandigarh, and at Supreme Court of India. Over to you, sir. Dr. Praveen Kumar Gupta.
Thank you, Ms. Kamna. So I am supposed to not to take long time, and as already there is so many speakers, so taking it my pious duty. So first of all, I am thankful to our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, that under whose continuous efforts since last 1 year, that I am able to have COVID vaccination yesterday itself and feeling safe. So that is also the part of in this entire exercise, I think so. And so session is very good, and I am thankful to Dr. Sanjay Mangla, the convener of this entire conference, and very nicely handled and all his team members. And I think that all the members of the panel discussion. So just I thought it that just for a moment, I take it that all the members pre-planned their discussion. That what the Madam Anjali Tandon started. So what she left, then other panelists answered the remaining queries. Then other panelists, then he discussed the remaining points. So it's gone very well. So I am highly thankful that in a wonderful panel discussion, I am a part of that. So I am thankful, Madam Tandon, that you initially raised the inclusive growth point very well, and also raised some other points. That the most important point you raised, that at the very outset, is curative care. Vaccination is not a curative care, just it is a preventive measure. And then, Dr. Badri Narayan, and he highlighted various aspects on digital transformation. So I'm thankful to Dr. Badri Narayan, and then Dr. Jutathip, and also raised a lot of important points. And he also highlighted that government collaboration with private sector. That is much, much important to raise this global economy. And I'm thankful to Dr. Jutathip. Thank you, ma'am. And then Dr. Faisal Ahmed. So I am very much impressed that the Dr. Faisal Ahmed, so he raised and very nicely and excellently described this geopolitics. And once a while, I thought that I am learning like a student, and he is my teacher. Though it is not my subject, it is geopolitics, but I enjoyed a lot. So thank you, Dr. Faisal Ahmed, and thank you a lot. And Dr. Sanjay Mangla, he is the captain of the ship today, and I am very much thankful. He summed up all the that conversation. So thank you very much. So I am thankful to all the persons in the who is behind the curtain, especially Dr. Praveen Kumar Singh, who is managing the all technical aspects of this today's conference. So I am very thankful. And I am thankful to all the team members, Ms. Nikita Jain, and then other persons, Diksha Goyal, and Dr. Gaurav Agarwal of the team member of Dr. Mangla. So thank you very much, and thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir. I thank everyone to be a part of this panel discussion of 6th International Conference on Drivers of Global Economy Recovery. Now we are going to have a lunch break. Kindly join us back at 3 p.m. for the valedictory session of the conference. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks.